Hey everyone, I just got back from Pac-Man's funeral. He died a few months ago from, natural causes. Anyways, he left me something in his will, so I think we should open it. Even in death, he still f***s with me. Pac-Man World 3, the third and final game in the Pac-Man World trilogy. And not only that, but the black sheep of it too. Yep, we're already starting with the negativity here. A lot of people don't like World 3. Even those who do consider it to be the weakest of the trilogy, and a lot of that can be attributed to its troubled development. It was originally called Pac-Man Adventures, a brand new 3D Pac-Man game with character designs by the legendary Don Bluth, and a grittier aesthetic compared to previous entries in the franchise, being developed by Blitz Games, best known for Glover and Chicken Run on Dreamcast. Then Pac-Man Adventures was cancelled, and Bluth moved on to other projects. Blitz reworked it into a third Pac-Man World game that would celebrate the franchise's 25th anniversary, just like how the first game celebrated the franchise's 20th, which Namco decided to give the green light to. They then merged with Bandai, and the new management created from this merger decided to cancel World 3. But Blitz pleaded to let development continue, and Bandai Namco decided to let them. They just wouldn't fund it, leading to the game releasing in November 2005 in a compromised state. It received mixed reviews from critics, and Namco wouldn't release another Pac-Man World game for 17 years. So I don't think it sold that well either. Despite that, World 3 is actually how I was introduced to the series. The World Series, not the overall Pac-Man franchise. Could you imagine though? It probably was for at least one kid in 2005. I had it along with some old PS2 games my Mima dug out of the archives in 2021, although I don't think I got around to it until the next year. I played it, and I really enjoyed it. But just like anyone who starts with the third entry in a series, I was curious to find out what the first two were like, which led me to find out about World 3's divisive reputation, as well as that the first game in the series had a remake coming up soon. I picked it up around the time it came out and completely dropped World 3. I eventually picked up a copy of World 2, played through that game, and went back to the original PS1 version of the first Pac-Man World, but I very rarely touched World 3 in the 3 years since I first played it. And whenever I did, I didn't really think it was as good as those initial play sessions. Did I have lower standards back then? Or does it still hold up and I just didn't give it a fair chance due to my experiences with the last two games? Well, it's been a while since I played World 1 or 2. Like, ever since those two videos I made on them dropped, I haven't picked them up once. So I feel like that last question shouldn't be a problem with this playthrough. And if the other videos on my channel haven't made it obvious to you, no, I do not have high standards at all. I love garbage. So, let's jump into Pac-Man World 3 and finally finish it to see how it stacks against the rest of the trilogy. And, you know, respect for the dead and all. Right off the bat, Pac-Man World 3 lets you know it'll be going in a completely different direction than the first two games. Its title screen, unlike World 1 and 2, doesn't have much going on. There's no energetic music or charming visuals, just the game's logo over a backdrop of some nature, while an ominous and atmospheric track plays in the background. Another major change can be noticed in the opening cutscene.
Did someone say cake?
Oh god, he can talk now. It's Pac-Man's 25th birthday, and both the Mrs. and Junior have made him a cake to celebrate. However, just like his 20th, something has to go wrong and he ends up randomly teleporting across the Pac village against his will, before completely disappearing. Pac-Man ends up in an underground mechanical hellscape, where he learns that the person teleporting him around is Orson, the main villain of the first Pac-Man world. Orson has no evil intentions in this game, however, revealing that he needs Pac-Man's help with something. And the first couple of levels have us journey over to a rendezvous point to meet Orson, since his teleporter doesn't exactly work, slowly learning the game's mechanics in the process. So, the first Pac-Man world was heavily inspired by Crash Bandicoot, having fixed camera angles and a very linear design kind of inspired by 2D games. World 2 was a more traditional and linear 3D platformer, and World 3 tries to be the gritty E10 Plus or teen-rated 3D platformer that started taking off during this era. Combat has a much larger focus in World 3 compared to the first two games. Pac-Man now has a basic punch and kick combo, and moves like the Revel and Butt Bounce, which in World 1 and 2 could be used to defeat enemies but were mainly used for platforming, have had aspects of them changed to work better in combat, such as the Revel coming to a complete stop pretty quickly, or the Butt Bounce always launching Pac-Man at one set height, and launching a shockwave if the player does 3 bounces in a row. And I don't really like either. There will still be times where the Revel and Butt Bounce are used for platforming or puzzles, but the changes made to make them better in combat make them very unpleasant outside of it. I don't like that the Revel goes to a complete stop 2 seconds after I release the button. It means that I just have to slowly walk over to where I want to go or keep spamming the X button. In addition to his base moveset, there are also special power-up pellets that Pac-Man can use similar to the first two games. There's the standard power pellet, which turns Ghost blue and edible, and is used to deal with spectral monsters that pop out of portals during certain parts of the levels, as well as the chrome power pellets from the first two games that turn Pac-Man's skin into metal and make him invincible. But there's also some newcomers, such as a green power pellet that allows Pac-Man to do a butt bounce with a much larger shockwave, one that allows him to shoot lightning from his fingertips, and the Silute from Sonic Frontiers. Unlike this game's version of the Revel and Butt Bounce, I actually really like the power pellets in this game. They're all super fun to use on enemies, and call back to Pac-Man's arcade roots pretty well. Due to the larger focus on combat, World 3's levels are the longest out of the whole trilogy by a long shot, taking anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes to finish. A real long time, and as I'll get into later, too much time. There are still plenty of sections where the game slows down and the player has to do some platforming and puzzle solving. There are even some sections where you have to play some classic Pac-Man mazes, but the majority of World 3's runtime is spent giving monsters and robots the old wombo combo. While completing the first handful of levels, Orson tells us more about what he needs Pac-Man's help for. According to him, multiple siphons have been placed across Pac-Land and are working to merge it with the Spectral Realm, which is this game's E for everyone friendly way of saying HE double hockey sticks. All of this being the work of the evil genius why does he look like that? Anyways, this is all the work of Irwin, who's looking to merge the two worlds together and rule them both. He's even captured Pac-Man's longtime rivals Inky and Blinky, who is actually Clyde but is called Blinky for some reason. I don't know why, it was just a common error in Pac-Man games at the time. Who knows? Maybe somebody in Namco was colorblind.
Oh my god! It's Mario.
Or just blind. Orson needs Pac-Man's help to find these siphons and destroy them, with him as the brain and Pac as the brawn. The two finally meet at Orson's base in the middle of the desert, where he introduces Pac-Man to his brand new Talkman. It's a neat little bit of continuity between games, but Talkman has sadly lost the charm he had in World 1. In that game, he was basically the Pac-Man series equivalent to Metal Sonic, but now, he's just a generic mech suit. You enter him as Pac-Man for 2 levels, and they suck. They're not terrible or anything, just boring and kinda mindless. You walk around in the mech and destroy sub-targets and robots. That's really it. After some target practice in the mech, the two set out on their journey to destroy the siphons. busting Irwin's bots and bums in the process. The two also beat Pac-Man's other iconic frenemies, Pinky and Clyde. They also don't want Pac-Man to merge with the Spectral Realm, and also want to save their friends from Irwin, meaning that they'll have to team up with Pac-Man? That's right. For the first time in the trilogy, we finally have multiple playable characters. Pac-Man will rev-roll on one of these machines to tag team either Pinky or Clyde, and they'll have to help solve a puzzle to help him progress. Pinky has the ability to make up to 3 invisible platforms appear to be used by Pac-Man, while Clyde has a scream that can break surrounding platforms and sonic waves he can blast at enemies. They're a nice change of pace from the usual gameplay with Pac-Man. Their movesets aren't as in-depth as his, but they're only used for smaller sections of the levels, so it didn't really bother me. Except for a couple of times with Blinky. They have a bunch of sections towards the end where you have to use his Sonic Blast on spectral monsters, and it's just not fun. You're just pressing the B button a lot, that's it. Along their journey, they meet all sorts of brand new allies and enemies, such as ew and what? Alright, I've been holding back on this for a while, but I feel like it's something I should probably mention now. The character designs in this game aren't that great. I already kinda tackled this when talking about Irwin a moment ago, but this applies to all the new characters in World 3. The character designs in World 1 and 2 weren't anything super special. A lot of it was just taking animals and objects and slapping some Pac-Man eyes on them. But they fit in with the rest of the world. And some characters like Spooky looked like they'd been here from the beginning. But in World 3, these new characters all look like they belong in different games. Irwin's henchman in particular here looks really bad. He looks like a Skylanders reject. Now, I decided to look at some of Don Bluth's concept art for this game back when it was still Pac-Man Adventures. A lot of these designs come from this stage of development, and I will admit, these designs look much better in 2D than 3D. It's very possible that the limited budget Blitz must have had, on top of the limitations of 6th generation hardware, could have led to these designs being butchered in the jump from 2D to 3D. But even then, I still don't think they fit in with the Pac-Man franchise. The locations you travel across also feel super out of place compared to World 1 and 2, going for, like I said earlier, a grittier aesthetic like other popular games at the time. Although unlike the character designs, I don't find this to be much of an issue. The first 2 games weren't exactly known for having the most original level themes out there, so going in this grittier direction doesn't really bother me that much. I actually really like how some levels look, such as the desert where Pac-Man meets Orson, this weird desert/marketplace where Pac-Man meets this green guy, or this abandoned village located up in some mountaintops. What does bother me is how many times we revisit them. I'm assuming due to Blitz's limited time and budget, there are a bunch of times where Pac-Man goes back to locations he already traveled to, or ones very similar to them. That way the developers don't have to spend more money creating new assets. They try their best to make them stand out from each other, such as how Pac-Man returns to the marketplace from earlier, only to find that it's been set on fire and needs to help the locals put all the flames out. That was neat. But there's also levels such as when Pac-Man goes to the Spectral Realm and the fog is just a different shade of red. My favorite level in this game is probably the village I mentioned earlier, and that's because it's one of the few stages in the game that Pac-Man doesn't revisit or has a similar looking clone later on. It causes you to kinda stop caring about the locations you're traveling across and focus all your attention towards the gameplay, which gets old really fast. Yet, the gloves are fully off now. I did not enjoy most of my time playing Pac-Man World 3. I thought it was kinda boring.
I just said that a gift that somebody gave me as part of their will sucked.
The power in my house went out immediately afterwards. Well, It definitely has some pretty solid ideas, and there were times that I enjoyed myself playing it. But the gameplay gets old pretty quick, and that's mainly due to one thing I mentioned earlier, the length of the levels. Like I said earlier, the levels of World 3 are the longest out of the entire trilogy. Even playing these levels casually, and not trying to get all the collectibles, these always take over 10 minutes to complete, and 20 to sometimes nearly 30 if you don't know what you're doing. Now, the levels in the Pac-Man World games have always been on the longer side, especially the first, but you can really feel the length with this one. The gameplay of World 3 just isn't as fun or well designed as those games. Pac-Man controls well, but it's still a massive step down from World 2. The platforming isn't nearly as challenging or fun, with a lot of the game's attention focusing on the combat, which gets really repetitive really quickly. Don't get me wrong, it can be enjoyable, but the long runtime of these levels means that you have to keep doing the same things over and over again. It eventually takes all the fun out of the game and makes playing it feel like a chore. The only thing making the game interesting during these bouts of boredom is its writing. I already kinda alluded to this earlier, with Pac-Man being able to talk. But Pac-Man World 3 has the most story out of the whole trilogy. Pretty much every major character has a voice now, and a lot of dialogue to go along with them. Despite the grittier locations Pac-Man and the gang travel to, the dialogue itself is actually pretty goofy and self-aware. Probably since the developers thought that a dark, melodramatic story with a circle as the protagonist wouldn't be taken seriously. There are definitely some times where the dialogue tries way too hard to be funny and quirky like it's an MCU movie, and I can't take the villains seriously at all. They're made into complete jokes. But overall, I really like this game's writing. It's pretty charming, and everyone gives solid performances. My personal favorite is the voice actor for Pac-Man, Martin T. Sherman. This guy is Pac-Man. He fits the role perfectly.
Give it up, Irwin. Conquering the universe never works for shrimpy megalomaniacs with mittens. It's a known thing. Sorry, Irwin. Zero's my limit. This wasn't part of the plan!
Eventually, Pac-Man meets Irwin for their final showdown. The fabric between Pac-Land and the Spectral Realm is on its last thread, and in order to prevent the world from plunging into darkness, Pac-Man will have to defeat a ship he already fought earlier in the game. To be fair, it's not a complete copy of that boss. There are plenty of brand new and harder to avoid attack patterns introduced. Not only that, but this is also better than that boss overall, since the previous one would keep launching robots that the player would need to avoid, while also having to take it out, which could get pretty annoying, while this one does none of that and has its attacks be much better choreographed to the player. You revel on these 4 pillars surrounding Irwin's ship while avoiding his attacks, which will cause this protective barrier surrounding him to go away and give you an opening to attack it, releasing Blinky and Inky in the process. It's a simple showdown, but a solid one. Just a bit underwhelming as the final boss and ending to the trilogy. With that, Irwin's plans for the Spectral Realm have been foiled, his final machine being destroyed along with him. Yeah, he just fucking dies. Despite that, there has still been a bunch of damage done to the realm, with Orson staying behind to fix it. Pac-Man comes back home to celebrate his birthday, but the rest of the ghosts come over asking to crash at his place while the realm is being restored. He kindly says no to the request, ending Pac-Man World 3. Could you give me just one moment? Similar to another game I covered recently, World 3 was a game that I really wanted to like. a sequel to Pac-Man World 2 with a darker tone and larger focus on story and combat is a pretty solid idea. You can tell Blitz was very passionate about this game. It was no cash grab. But the game's troubled development sadly made it so that none of its ideas were executed very well. The platforming is a lot more simple and not nearly as fun as it was in the previous installments. The combat system they have is very unique and a solid way to bring that type of gameplay into the World Series, but is still not fleshed out enough and gets repetitive really quickly. And the overall art direction, which while looking pretty nice at times, mainly in the environments, it feels super out of place compared to the last two games and the Pac-Man IP as a whole. It leads to the game feeling a lot like the rest of Blitz's catalog. A mediocre licensed kids game. What instead of Timmy Turner or SpongeBob SquarePants being on the box, it was Pac-Man this time. That being said, I really hope that World 3 is given a second chance by Bandai Namco, and gets the repack treatment someday. The remake they did for World 1 helped iron out a lot of its rougher edges, and made it a much better game as a result. And I feel like a remake of World 3 could do the same thing, even if it would probably take a bit more work. And it seems like that might actually happen someday, as a remake of World 2 was announced as I was making this video, and is coming out like, the same day this video drops, wow. Not only that, but World 2 Repack has fully fledged voice acting like the third game, even bringing back Martin T. Sherman as the voice of Pac-Man. It seems like there is interest at Bandai Namco for a World 3 remake, and if World 2 Repack sells well, we might actually get one. But if that ever happens, it probably won't be for a few more years, judging by the gap between the remakes of World 1 and 2. Meaning that, as of now, Pac-Man World 3 remains as a pretty lackluster ending to the trilogy, and another sad case of troubled developments leading to a compromised end product.
Okay, let's do this.
Power's back on. You have got to be kidding me.